Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Emergency Preparedness Seminar. Give yourselves a hand because you could have been anywhere doing anything today. You could have been working in your yard, mowing the grass. I shouldn't give you a list, should I? But give yourselves a hand for being here today. Amen. I'm your host, Karen Ford, and first and foremost, there is hot coffee in the back as well as some bottles of water. Feel free. For those of you who may not know, right through these double doors, up the steps, there are restrooms. To the left is men's. To the right is the ladies' restroom as well. Each of you should have received a manual today. If you did not receive it, please, the ushers will give you one. There should be one, at least one per couple. And then if you have not received a ticket for this wonderful pressure canner, please raise your hand so we can make sure that you get in the drawing as well. All right. I'd like to thank Dr. John Polis, who is my spiritual father, for the opportunity today and had the foresight to have this emergency preparedness seminar today. And we are live streaming as well, so we also want to welcome the live streamers. So why prepare for an emergency? Won't God take care of us? I mean, can't he just throw down some manna from heaven if we come up short or something? I mean, why wouldn't he do that? Well, during the pandemic, if you noticed, when that all began, we were buying toilet paper like it was gold and silver. Did you notice? There was a shortage of toilet paper. There was shortages of other items. Since then, we've had gas prices go up, which means all other items have gone up in price. And what are we hearing in the news today? We're hearing about blockchain supply. We're hearing about what if the trucks don't make it in? What if they can't travel across the borders? What will we do? Well, we want to talk about this today because what if that does happen? What if there are blackouts and brownouts and you're unable to cook or you can't get to the store because the store doesn't have anything? So we just want to be a people who are prepared. But the first thing that we want to make sure is that we do not enter into fear because fear has torment. We're people of faith and the just live by faith. Faith is the victory that overcomes the world. So God is our supplier. He said, I've never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging for bread. But we not only want to prepare for ourselves, but we want to prepare for those around about us who may not have prepared. Amen? All right. Noah, being warned of God of things not seen, prepared an ark to the saving of his house. What if Noah had not built the ark? What would have happened? And Noah didn't wait until it started to rain to build the ark. So we don't want to wait until we already have an emergency on our hands before we prepare. Proverbs 27:12 says, the wise prepare, the fool goes blindly ahead to suffer the consequences. Proverbs 21:20, the wise store up choice food and olive oil. Proverbs 22:3, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. So we can see and hear in the news about the possibility of blockchain supply. We see and hear about the possibility of blackouts or brownouts, and we've already seen what happened at the onset of the pandemic with food shortages as well as toilet paper shortages. So we can be a people who are prepared, not only for ourselves and our family members, but also those around about us. Joseph's successful management saved a nation. We are able to help people and help bring them to salvation because of our preparation. So today we aren't going to wait for the rain to start dropping down before we prepare. Today we are going to be those who are wise and prepare. And today we are going to plan, prepare, and be those who help people into salvation. So our first speaker is going to be Steve Sims, and I want you to see in your manual the schedule. However, there's just a couple of different changes, but you can follow along in your manual. These manuals are for you to take home. Feel free to write notes in them, and you'll better prepare yourself. Okay.
Morning. As Karen said, my name is Steve Sims. We're going to be talking on items to stockpile slash things to have on hand to be prepared. Stockpiling is kind of a big undertaking. I'm not sure if anybody in here actually does any type of preparation work or not, but the cost of stockpiling can go through the roof, especially today. If you haven't actually stockpiled on items and you start walking through the grocery store and look at a few things you'd really like to have on hand, the numbers are going to run up really quick at the register. So if you start out small and you're prepared for slight emergencies, not necessarily a total supply chain, just dropping out of the bottom and not being able to get anything at the store. Like Karen said, if COVID taught us anything, it's at least that the items deplete from the supermarket really, really quick. If you've ever walked into the Walmart or your local grocery store when there's supposed to be a big storm coming, you're going to notice that the only bottles of water left on the shelf are the ones that are $5 a piece because everybody else went out and got everything. So if your plan for an emergency is to run out and get stuff right before the storm hits, then you're going to notice everybody else in your surrounding area probably thinks the same way. So if you're prepared, you don't have to worry about getting out, getting anything. You just kind of hunker in, relax, and let the emergency ride by. So FEMA's had a list out for a long time that gives you the basics to have on hand in case of an emergency. So being prepared really depends on what you're preparing for, where you live, what weather is it, what season is it. You don't need to have a heat source in the middle of summer. You need to have a way to cool yourself off, right? So FEMA suggests a lot of things. Some of this stuff you can pick up fairly cheap. Water is number one on the list. That's because you can only survive for estimated 3 days without water. Your body starts to go into dehydration, shutting down. You can't process food. That type of thing happens. So you should have 1 gallon of water per person per day for a minimum of 3 days. So a family of 5, you have to have 15 gallons of water on hand. So you can get a water filter. You can pick these up reasonably cheap, $20-$30. Non-perishable foods, about 3 days worth. Now, you can have non-perishable foods that are going to last you a long time, but you should, if there's an emergency, and let's just go with a big storm scenario on all this. If there's a big storm that comes in, takes out the power. Look at Kentucky today; they're flooded out. They don't have water. They don't. If you live in a city right now in Kentucky, you don't have, your sewage isn't working. You don't have water. You're without power. You have to kind of depend on yourself. There's not going to be a big army of people to swoop in and take care of you right away. So non-perishable foods, but if your power's out, use from the fridge first. A manual can opener, because it's going to be horrible to look at all this food you've got stockpiled and not be able to open it up and use it. An emergency radio. Here's a small one. I've got several of these, but this is one you pick up for $10. You crank on it. You got a light. You've got radio. If power is out for several days, it's not long before your electronic devices are dead. During Superstorm Sandy, there was a massive amount of supplies available to people. After about 3 or 4 days in New York, nobody knew about it because they didn't have power or any way to listen to the radio or listen to the broadcast. If you had a crank radio, you now can listen to whatever kind of emergency broadcast is coming over the radio. Flashlights and lanterns, some of just these cheap ones you can get. This is a 70-hour runtime on this. So just to light up your house in the evenings, you can get by with several days for that. Of course, extra batteries. You need a first aid kit. Now, this all depends, again, on your location, who you are, what you're about, what you're going to be doing, the activities. If you've got a massive snowstorm and you're going to be shoveling snow and you happen to slip and lay your arm open, can you make it to the hospital? You need more than a Band-Aid and a bottle of aspirin, is what I'm saying in your first aid kit. Have some supplies and some knowledge on how to use it. Rubber gloves, candles, because batteries only last so long, so if you want to light your house up, candles are a good way to do it. Of course, matches and lighters. Duct tape. Everybody wants to have duct tape on hand. I've used it for a Band-Aid several times myself. Cash. If you're shut down, can't get out anywhere, your neighbor may have something you need, and for a couple bucks, you can get it off of them instead of trying to make your way to the store. We had a snowstorm a few years ago, and at the end of our driveway, the snow measured 47 inches. We weren't going anywhere for several days. So, these things happen. The camp stove and fuel. Here's just some of the Sterno cans. You can get these for a couple bucks. You light them off. They burn for a long time. You can cook over these. They make it hot enough to fry eggs, and it doesn't take up much space. You just have to have it on hand because, if during the emergency, you may not be able to get this stuff. So, and of course, nobody wants to hear about masks, but an N95 mask, because if you're in your house, well, in this area, we don't really worry about it, but like, it's a good thing to have on hand in California because, or anywhere out west, because wildfires, you're driving along, you put a mask on, you can breathe. If you're in a house with your kids and one of the kids happen to be sick, you'd be ahead for that one kid to have a mask on, or somebody else to have a mask on when you're around them, so the entire house isn't infected. Paper plates, bowls, plastic silverware, because if your water system would happen to be down, which a lot of people, I guess, of course, we'll talk about water in a little bit, but most people just think water's always there. There's pumping stations that provide this pressure and water to you. So if the stations are down because of storms, power outages, you may not have water. You might not have not had water for a long time, but if your power's out and it's sub-zero outside, you're not prepared to keep your water lines froze, you're probably not going to have water. So you don't want to be washing, what my point was, you don't want to have to start washing. You just use your plastic stuff, and you just throw it away when you're done. So plastic or tarp. An emergency whistle, now it's kind of in certain areas, and there's been buildings that have collapsed. People use an emergency whistle to be located. If you're in a city and there's no power out, it's dark, there's no power, you're trying to get around. If you do happen to find yourself a little bit lost, you can be located really easy with a whistle. It could be heard a lot better than you screaming. 5-gallon bucket, garbage bags, moist towelettes, ties, and this is something a lot of us don't want to think about, but if you do happen to have an outage, if you live in an apartment building or a townhome where your neighbors are right on top of you, if your water system's down, most commodes have 1, maybe 2 flushes left in them, and that's it. So if the time comes that you need to use the restroom and if the power's out, the water's out for a couple of days, more than likely you're not really going to have somewhere to go. So we have to just kind of be prepared for stuff. You may not, we're all kind of used to the conveniences of life in modern days, but if you don't have several acres around your woods, your neighbor's probably not going to want to watch you use the restroom next to their house. So be prepared to be able to take care of stuff inside. Yes?
Everything I've read on this, make sure you have a shovel.
Yes, and a shovel. Shovel's very good, yes. Yes, exactly. So, and games or some form of entertainment. If you have kids, I know mom and dad's work, we get busy. It's nice to be able to say, hey, or watch a movie or, entertain yourself for a few minutes. If power's out, the cell phones are going to run for so long. So if you have some type of game, card, something to do with your family to keep people entertained, it's going to make the stay indoors for a day or two a little less miserable or annoying. So emergencies, it's a time for emotions that can really run high. If you're stuck inside, if you don't have power, if you don't have water, if it's storming outside, if there's been a tornado come through, whatever the scenario is, people can really wig out really quick. And when you're under pressure and you're panicked, you're not thinking proper, you're not thinking straight. So if you have this stuff, and this stuff should all be in a kit. Anything you get that you stockpile should be in a kit. And it should be used only for, your plastic silverware, your paper plates. They should be used for emergencies only. Now, if you happen to use that, replenish it right away. If you have people come over and you want to use some paper plates, I'd advise against using anything out of your emergency kit. But if you do use it, make sure you replenish it right away. Don't say, well, I'll get it eventually, because you never know when emergency is going to happen. New York City just released, here a few weeks ago, they released a PSA, a public service alert, to the citizens of New York of what to do in case of a nuclear attack or a nuclear explosion. Either yesterday or the day before, they released that every individual in New York City should have a go bag, including kids, in case you need to leave your house at a moment's notice. Now, they didn't say why they were suggesting this, but they were suggesting that they have stuff. So they're telling at one point in time, there was 2 million people in the city of New York, and they're suggesting that those people in that city be able to grab a bag and leave at a moment's notice. So usually the government tells you to hunker in place, stay where you're at if there's an emergency. So now you're starting to hear government give people information of you may have to leave. So, and cities can get bad really quick in emergencies. If your neighbor doesn't have anything and they're not, if your neighbor doesn't have anything and they're not prepared and they're not the nicest person, more than likely they're going to want to try to come take your stuff. So have what you need. Don't tell a whole lot of people. Don't be rude about it, but I'm just saying you don't want to broadcast everything you have. And this all depends on your situation, where you are, what the weather is, where your location is. You should also have a form of heat, some sort of heat. If you don't have a backup generator, if you don't have a wood burner, if there's no way you can get that stuff, if you're in an apartment building or a townhome or somewhere where this stuff just isn't available to you, then if you just have a small buddy heater, they sell them at Walmart for $50, and you can get the canisters. They'll heat one room. They'll keep you warm. You won't have to sit around being cold all day. You can provide a little bit of heat. And power sources, there's like this small one here. We got this actually I bought this when I was at the beach one year with our family because the hurricane come through and we lost power for 3 days. So we ran out and got that. It was the last one on the shelf because everybody else was doing the same thing. So, of course, when you're on vacation, you're not really thinking about being prepared for emergencies. But anyhow, we've used this several times. Power goes out. The internet was still intact. You can hook this to your router. You've now got your Wi-Fi back. You've got internet access. You can charge your cell phone, listen to the radio, whatever you need to do, and watch the TV. So they're fairly inexpensive, but there's something I think everybody should have. You can travel with it. You can use it at your home. And I know that's like a lot of information just kind of jammed in to a short period of time. But what you have to have first and foremost is a plan. You have to plan of what you're doing. You can't just kind of fly by the seat of your pants on this stuff. You have to, if you're on medication, you need to do what you can to have extra medication, be a month ahead on medication. If you're, whether you're in the city or in the country, everybody's situation is different. So you need to prepare for yourself, sit down, make a list, get a plan, and then just stick to it. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so my name is Rhonda Sims, and I am going to be talking about pressure canning and other methods to preserve food for long-term storage. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right, so I wanted to start by dispelling some myths. Now, many people are terrified of the thought of preserving their own food for a couple reasons. The first reason is because they think they're going to do it improperly and they're going to poison their family with botulism or E. coli or salmonella. Then we have other people who are afraid to pressure can because they think that this is going to turn into a pressure bomb that's going to go off and destroy their kitchen or kill them. And those are completely invalid fears. Canning has actually been around for hundreds of years. I did a little research, and I was really, if you have time, you can kind of look it up and see the history of pressure canning. It's pretty fascinating. It's come a very long way in safety, just like the car that you came here in. If we looked at the cars that were originally built, they had no airbags, they had no seat belts, they were just a death trap waiting to happen. But we now, all of us drove here probably in a car today, and the safety has really come a long way. So if you follow your manufacturer's guidelines for safe canning procedures, you should be just fine. So let me start out by talking about pressure canning. Now this process mimics commercial canneries where food is heat treated to remove contaminants. It cooks the food and vacuum seals them all at the same time. Pressure canning is for low acidic foods only, such as meat, vegetables, soups, and beans. A pressure canner is, as you can see, it's a large pot, and it has a lid that locks onto the pot that has a dial or a weighted gauge to regulate pressure that builds up inside the pot by turning up or down the heat. It heats the jars to 240 degrees, which kills microorganisms and spores that cause things like botulism. So as long as you follow the guidelines, it heats it to kill all of those things. You don't have to worry about killing your family. So pressure canners have a regulator. Let me get down here where I can get my hands on. So this is the pressure canner, and it has the lid that has a rubber gasket, and that's what seals. And it has a regulator. Where did I put my regulator? Oh, here it is. This is the regulator. Now, there are different types of pressure canners. As you can see, the way my lid looks is different than this one. This one has a dial that has numbers on it. So there are several different types of pressure canners, but they all have a pressure gauge that will tell you what pressure, depending on what type of food, if you're doing meat or if you're doing vegetables or you're doing fruit. Those are all going to require different types of pressure and canning times. Also, your altitude. Now, we're from Preston County, so we're at over 1,600 feet. So most of the things that I have to use 15 pounds of pressure. Now, like I said, you need to always follow your canner manufacturer guidelines for safe canning and proper use. And people think, this is another myth, people think that canning is really hard. It isn't hard. It's time consuming and it's kind of back-breaking work, but it's not hard work. We're all intelligent people. We all probably have jobs and have raised children and done all these kinds of things, so you'll be just fine. So I wanted to just walk you through really quick, like if we were going to pressure can chicken, just to show you how easy this actually is. So I actually brought a jar with me today. I actually just canned this recently, this year. My husband and I decided this year we were going to really go all in, and we bought meat birds. And so we raised these little chicks. The meat birds are a specific breed, and they're ready to butcher in 8 to 10 weeks. So we've gone down that mountain and up the other side, and I'm alive to tell the story. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, so let's just say we're going to can chicken. My granddaughter let me borrow her little plastic chicken. So we're going to use that for a prop. So you're going to take your canning jars. Now, for meat and things like, I did some peaches yesterday, some things you're going to want to use a wide mouth. Now, if you're canning things that are more liquid, like soups or broth, you can use a small mouth jar. But anything that you need to dig out of the jar, like meat or fruit and things like that, you're going to want to use a wide mouth jar. The first thing you're going to want to do is sanitize your jars. My mom was old school. Everything was washed by hand. I'm too lazy for that. Dishwasher with a little bit of bleach or whatever you use to run your dishwasher is fine. And then you're going to sanitize your jars and set those aside. And then you take a little pan of water, and you are going to have a little pan of water. These are canning lids, and these are the canning rings. Okay, these are kind of the old school method. Everybody's grandma, mom used these. I use them for some. But then there's a new way. All right, if you're an eco-friendly person and you don't want to buy stuff and toss it out every year, they actually have reusable lids and rings. And you buy these from companies, and you can use these year after year after year. They're a little bit more costly, but over the course of a few years, it works itself out. All right, so we're going to take a little pot of water, you're going to put it on your stove, and you're going to put your little lids in there and turn it down on low, and you're going to heat those lids up. And what it does is it softens this rubber ring. So I put those in a pan, and I put those on the stove, set those aside. My jars are set aside. Now you're going to begin to prepare your meat. So we're going to pretend like we're going to can chicken today. And so I would get my cutting board, my utensils, and my meat. If you buy bulk, let's say you can find maybe chicken breasts on sale, you want to buy in bulk, you bring it home, you're going to clean it off, and then you're going to begin to chop it into little chunks. And after, you guys are more than welcome to come and take a peek at this. But anyways, you're going to cut it into little chunks. I put it in a bowl until I cut a whole bunch. And then you're going to begin to put the stuff in your clean jars. So you take the meat and you're going to put it in, and you kind of stuff as much as you can get in there. And then you take like a wooden spoon or a regular spoon, and you're going to kind of do one of these numbers, and you're trying to get all of the air bubbles out so you can get the maximum amount of chicken in your jar. You're going to do that. And then you're going to add your canning salt. I actually don't use traditional canning salt. I am more organic, and I use pink Himalayan sea salt. So I put some of that in there. Some people like to put spices and things. That's your whatever your prerogative is. So once you have your jars packed, then you're going to, and you've added your salt, you do not add any liquid when you're canning meats. You can can deer meat, you can can steaks, you can just any kind of meat that you can get your hands on, but you never add liquid, which was a hard process for me to grasp because everything else you put liquids on. But this makes its own juice, and you can see, that jar's pretty full of juice, and that all came from that little bit of chicken. Once we get that done and they're packed, the salt is in, we haven't added any liquid, now we're going to take a paper towel or something and we are going to wipe a wet paper towel. Some people use vinegar, a little dab of vinegar. You're going to clean off the rim of your jar. The reason we're going to do that is because then we're going to put our little lid on. And we want this to make a good seal. And if you haven't properly cleaned the lid off, 1 grain of salt can keep your jar from sealing. We're going to put the lid on the clean rim, and then we're going to put our rings on. Just hand tight. We're not going to Hercules this thing on here. We're just going to crank it tight. All right, then we're going to pack our canner. Now, my canner takes 2 quarts of water to run. Other canners probably take different amounts of water. So I've already put my water in. I'm going to put this stuff in the canner. Once it's full, I'm going to put my lid on. And I'm going to turn it around and lock the lid. And then I'm going to put this on the stove. Now, if you have a glass top stove, you better check your manufacturer's guidelines. A lot of people think that you can can on glass top stoves. Now today I have heard that there are some manufacturers that are putting out glass top stoves that will take the weight of this, but when you put 7 quarts in this canner, it is very heavy and it can crack the glass. So you just want to make sure. What we have done, Steve and I have a little, I bought a secondhand electric stove, and Steve has rigged me up this little thing on the back porch, so I do all my canning on an electric stove on the back porch. So you're going to bring this up to temperature, and I know it's up to temperature because this little spout is going to begin to spew steam in like a cone shape, and you let that run for 10 minutes. And then you're going to put your weighted gauge on. So like I said, mine's 15 pounds. And you're going to let that set and continue. And in a little bit, this thing is going to start going crazy. Spinning around, going crazy. At that moment, I'm going to start a timer. If we're cooking chicken, it's 90 minutes that you're going to need to cook the chicken. Once you begin your timer, you're going to start turning your heat back, because my canner says that I need to let this thing 3 or 4 times a minute. It should go and then stop. And there will be a long pause, and then it'll stop. 3 to 4 times a minute tells me that I'm at the appropriate temperature. Now, like I said, this one has an actual pressure gauge that you can visibly see that will tell you that you're at the appropriate temperature. So once my 90 minutes is over, you turn the power off and you take this off of the stove and you let it rest. And in a little bit, maybe 10, 15 minutes, when all the pressure is off, you can take off the gauge and you can take the lid off. And after you take the lid off, you're going to begin to remove your jars out. Now, also you want to make sure that you do not have any fans running. You want to turn your air conditioner off, keep doors and windows closed. My mother canned for over 50 years, and she only had 1 jar burst. And the reason that the jar burst is because when she was taking it out of the canner, she had a fan running, and that cold air blew across the jar and it caused it to explode. So if you're careful and you turn all that stuff off, you can unload your canner with no problems whatsoever. Once I get my jars unloaded, I then cover them with a towel and you just let them rest. And in a little bit, you're going to hear this glorious little sound, ping, ping, ping. And that's telling you that all of your lids are sealing properly. And so I just leave them set with the rings on overnight, probably at least 24 hours, I think is what the recommendation is, before you take the rings off, and then you're good to go. You store these on your shelf 1.5 years, 2 years. You've got lots of food to eat. So again, just make sure and check your guidelines and make sure that you're following steps appropriately. There are so many things that you can can. I really kind of got out there this year. I started canning meals in a jar because for emergency preparedness, but also if you're a busy parent and you work all day, you could can. I did pot roast potatoes, carrots, onions, and garlic in a jar. It's a meal in a jar. So when we come, you come home from a busy day, crack open a couple jars, heat them up, feed the family. You don't really have to think too much on that one, right? Okay, let me check my time. So We've talked about pressure canning. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is water bath canning. Water bath canning is a method that's been around a long time, and it is used for high acidic foods. So anything that has, like a high acidic content, like tomatoes, some fruits and things like that. This method, you submerge your sealed jars in a large pot of boiling water, and then you boil the jars for a specific amount of time that is determined by whatever type of food you are and you're preparing in the size of your jar. Most things, well, all things that you can in a quart jar is going to require more time, either in the pressure canner or in the hot water bath method. The pints take less time. So water bath canning kills off E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and other pathogenic bacteria that might be present. Also, many yeasts and molds and other bacteria. It also drives out the air in the jar that could cause spoilage, and it vacuum seals the jars as they cool. So basically, you're putting water in here and you're bringing it to a boil, and then you're packing your jars exactly the same way we did over there, and then you're putting these in, and you have to leave, I think it's 1 inch to 2 inches of water above the lid of the jar, and you're going to boil that with the lid on for a specific amount of time. Same thing, when that's finished, you remove your jars and then you wait for the seals. Now these I used the eco-friendly on my fruit. The pressure canner, I tend to use more of the metal lids. Okay, then there's another method. I don't have one of these, but I've ordered one. Steam canning. Steam canning has been around a long time. It's new to me, but I've done some research on it, and basically, it's also for high acidic foods. It kind of takes the place of the hot water bath. You're using way less water, and it takes less time because you don't have to wait. To heat this up for one turn, it might take me 35 or 40 minutes to get this water to a boil because you're using almost an entire kettle of water. Whereas in the steam canning, you're literally using a couple inches of water. So it saves a lot of time, but it's pretty much the same method. You're just canning with steam instead of boiling water. So lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about freezing. This is another thing. Some people are like, well, I just don't know if I want to jump off that cliff and this, So, okay, let's talk about freezing. And that is a good thing to do, but as Steve has told us, a couple years ago, we had just bought a bunch of stuff. We bought a bunch of meat and a bunch of frozen items, and we put them in our deep freezer, and then the power went off for several days. At that time, we did not have a generator to run the whole entire house, and so we basically lost all of that food after a few days. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't have that much money to throw away. So freezing is a method that we can use. And you can preserve things for a really long time, like meats and vegetables, milk, cheese, yogurt, and fruit. A lot of people don't realize that you can, freeze those type of items, but you can. We do it all the time. I buy bulk items. Like, I went to the store and they had a sale on American cheese slices. The thing was like this big. Well, Steve and I live alone, so we don't need that much cheese. We have grandkids, but we don't need that much cheese. But I bought it because it was on sale. I actually bought 2 of them, and then I brought it home and I opened the package, and we vacuum sealed just little blocks, and then I threw it in the freezer. So we just take out what we need when we need it. Now, not all fruits and vegetables freeze well because of the high water content. Things like tomatoes, lettuce, that kind of stuff doesn't freeze well, but I do know folks who freeze them anyways because, like, if you're making soup or spaghetti sauce, you don't really care if it's in chunks. So you can freeze those items, and then you can make soups or salsa or whatever you want to make, spaghetti sauce, out of those types of items. So with that being said, you could still really potentially put just about anything in the freezer as long as you have a way to keep that freezer running so that you don't lose anything. And in your syllabus, I gave you just a list. This is not an exhausted list, but a few things that do freeze very well. All meat products, of course, corn, beans, peppers, onions, berries. We live in Preston County, and we have blackberries on our property till kingdom come. And so every day we make our rounds, and and I just keep a bag in the freezer, and every day we just keep putting them in, and those will keep until the grandkids want a cobbler or a pie. peaches, nectarines, rhubarb, carrots, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, mangoes, pineapple, cherries, apples, beets, pears. Some leafy greens they freeze well, like kale, spinach, chard, collard greens, and beet greens. And like I said, milk, I freeze milk a lot because we don't drink that much milk. So if it's on sale, buy a gallon or 2 gallons. When you get it home, crack the top, pour out about this much out of the container, unless you want to put it into a different container. But pour out that much because when things freeze, they expand. So we've got probably a couple gallons at least in the freezer at present moment. Butter is another thing. Butter's expensive right now. And if you don't make your own, I buy in bulk, throw it in the freezer. Sour cream, yogurt, and many, many other things. So I was thinking about all of this stuff and to kind of get my head wrapped around the reality of what we're talking about. If you're planning, let's say we have a natural disaster, or let's say we have a food shortage, and you are planning to eat 2 meals a day, and you think, well, I can survive if I can just maybe do breakfast and dinner, or whatever. You would need 60 jars or servings per person per day for 30 days. That's per person. You would need 180 jars or servings per person for 3 months, and you would need 540 jars or servings per person for 6 months. So if you are a family of 2, that's doubled. If you have kids, that's tripled or quadrupled. It's a lot. It's a lot, I know. And again, Karen said we are not trying to breed fear here, but I wanted to give you the reality. My grandmother, I didn't know her, but my dad would tell the story. There was her and my grandfather, and they had 4 children. She canned 2,400 jars a year. Wow. And that didn't include whatever else she did to preserve foods, because they smoked meats and did all kinds of stuff. But that's just like it's a little bit of a slap in the face of reality that when you start thinking about long term, do the math. Think about who you're going to try to feed, and then do your servings accordingly. Now, Steve and I have come to an agreement. I canned those meals in a jar, and I looked at him, and I was like, surely we can get 2 meals out of 1 jar, right? So if we took one of these jars a day, we could get by, with 60 jars for a month. Also, what was new to me this year, maybe not to some of you, eggs. I had no idea canning eggs was a thing. There's all kinds of ways to preserve eggs. We live, like I said, up in Preston County, and we have a whole flock of chickens, and the ones that lived that will give us eggs, we will be canning lots and lots of eggs. I want to encourage you. I put some websites on here. Also, scan the internet for recipes. There are so many just incredibly cool people out there that have figured out how to can some pretty incredible things. They're creative people. You can can spaghetti sauces, chilies, soups. I'm really going to dive in this year and try a bunch of new recipes. But just experiment. See what you like. See what your family likes. I think it's really fun. It's a creative outlet. Yes, it's a lot of work, but we can do this. As far as the eggs are concerned, this is just in a salt and sugar brine. And I read this lady's post, and I was like, ew, sugar and eggs. But we'll see what happens when we crack these babies open. But also, she had on there, what was the jalapeno and some other kind of spice. Like if you like spicy stuff, you can use coriander, you can use dill. Just get creative and see what you can come up with. So, yeah, I think I covered just about everything. I wanted to say this one last thing. Basically, anything you find in the grocery store that's in a can, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you, you can't can meat. Do you go to Walmart and buy cans of tuna? Do you go to Walmart and buy cans of chicken and roast beef? Sure do. Oh, you can't can eggs? Really? Have you gone to Walmart and seen pickled eggs in a jar? Basically, anything you can find in the grocery store that's in a can or a jar, you can do that at home. Save yourself money, put in the effort, and have a good time.
That's great. Woo, good job, Rhonda. Good job. You hold on. That's a lot of information.
Yes,
How many people are getting all of this information? Great, right? Okay. ahead, Rhonda.
Well, on those websites, you're going to find, because this is coming, some of these are government websites, they recommend, and I'm going to give you that information. I mean, 18 months to 2 years is the only shelf life that they're going to give you. But like you, my mom and dad were very old. They had me very late in life. They came from a different generation. When my mother passed away last year, she was still eating beets that she had canned like 8 or 10 years. I swear to you, if the seal is not broken, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's good.
5 years old. He's had
Okay.
meat that was 5 years old. So,
Right.
like I said, the only thing, they recommend that when you open up canned products, that you
Yeah.
heat them up, because then again, heating them again is going to kill
Right.
anything. So that, I don't want to give you a gospel word on
Right.
that. Use your wisdom,
Yeah.
do some research, and then do your own thing there.
And one thing to note, though, as long as the seal has
Yes,
not
has
been
not been
broken, and then heating it up, but
Yes.
use your own discretion and wisdom. Right now, we want to make sure that everyone has received a ticket. If you have not received a ticket for the drawing of the pressure canner and the case of jars, raise your hand. Anybody? Okay, where's the basket of tickets? Okay. All right. Great. Everyone has a ticket? Okay, we want to give everybody an opportunity to win. Come on up. Grab the ticket. Pick one. Got it? You got one? Okay, all right. All right, have your tickets ready. The number is 421215. Who did? Wonderful. Yay. That's wonderful, sir. Great. Congratulations. You're very welcome. So this pressure canner in case of jars is for you. Happy canning to you. You're welcome. Okay. Oh, thank you, Bill. All right, our next speaker is Steve. So if we want to switch out the tables, where is your table? Right over here? Okay.
Prepared meats out in Indiana, and they sell meat, and it's delicious meat. There's beef, pork, chicken, whatever you want, ground beef or chunk beef, no, chicken too. And they told me it's good for 5 years, but he said, if you store it properly, it's good for 20, 25 years.
Wow. Okay. All right.
We'll take some time and talk about life's essential water. Get on my spectacles. So it's an essential part of life. Said before that the body can live for 3 days without water. It's used daily for many tasks, not just hydration, but cooking, cleaning, gardening, washing, etc. Hydration is also required for your body to process food. So again, a rule of thumb is, and FEMA's recommendation is to have 1 gallon of water per person per day. It's the minimum needed. More likely, we probably use hundreds of gallons of water a day. If you think about it, by the time you spend all that time standing in the shower and washing clothes and drinking. But if one day you went to your faucet and turned it on, it didn't work, where would you be then? And there are scenarios where water's off. There's some places, towns and cities, that you have water towers. They pump water up to the tower to gravity feeds down. The places it's just ran on a pumping system. It's not always just there. A lot of people don't realize that you don't just turn on a tap and there's not a line going to a big pond somewhere that gives you water. It's processed, it's pumped, it all takes electricity, it takes manpower. If there's a natural disaster of an immense proportion, the people that mandate or the people that manage these systems are probably not going to be worried about you getting water. They're going to be home with their families. So if there's a situation that requires people to be with their families, then your waters may still come to you, but it may not be filtered it out. The proper chemicals might not be in it. You know, we had it at our house here 2 years ago. Our water supply had a big outbreak of algae, some type of blue-green algae in it, so it made it pretty much unusable. You had to go to the whole boil water. You see on the news all the time, you know, boil water advisory in this area or that area. So there's a lot of different ways we can take care of water, maintaining water. There's storage. There's short-term storage, which is basically you buying some gallon jugs and a lot of cases of water. You stock up what you think you might use, you and your family, for 2, 3, 4 days, a month, 6 months, a year, whatever whatever your preference is. I tend to try to keep as much water as possible, or at least a way to take care of the water at the house. But this stuff you rotate out. So today you'll stop at the store and get a case of water. You'll take it, put it in your storage, take the water from the bottom, the oldest one, and you'll start using it. If anybody's tried to store water for a long time in the bottles, it's not, within a year they start crinkling up, they'll crack open, they leak out. There's stuff that happens in those. The bottles, they're not meant to have that water in them for a long period of time. Now there's long-term storage, which is you can get a container like this. This is BPA free, so it doesn't have the chemicals that are going to break down and get into the water that can make you sick, but it'll also ruin the container, just kind of starts falling apart. These you can pick up at the Big W, or I'm sure the Big A's got them. But this is a $15 item, and this is 6 gallons jug. This is BPA free. I've seen some real world studies. And a lot of people tell you a lot of things, but I've seen guys actually go to, Walmart and get spring water, just pure spring water, put it in one of these. They test it with a test kit, put it in one of these. The guy stored it in his closet, cool, dry place, 5 years, pulled it out, opened it up. It tested exact same as the day he put it in. So if you got good, clean, quality water, you can store it in a container that won't leach out into the water, and you can have water on hand for a long time. Now, this can get you by for about a week if you're just drinking. If you're going to want to wash your body off, you're going to need a little bit more. It just depends on the scenario. You can pick up some filters. This is a cheap RV filter. This is a $10 item. It comes with a small hose hooked to your garden sprayer. The filter itself has activated charcoal in it, so it takes odors out, it takes chlorine out, it really cleans the water up. So if you don't want to go purchase a lot of water to try to store, you can buy a filter like this. They have a rating on them of how long the filter lasts. So you can put thousands of gallons through this filter, fill up plenty of these, and you'll be set for quite a long time. So there's short-term storage, there's long-term storage. There are purification processes, quite a few of them. Actually, there's chemical, which a lot of, I'm sure they use something other than this, but a lot of special forces just go with the chemical. This is a 2-part unit you buy. You put 2 of these tablets in a quart, let it set shake it up, let it set for 30 minutes. You then put this tablet in to kill the process of the first tablet, and then in 10 minutes, that water's pure to drink, and it takes out bacterias of all kinds. The problem with purification is you have to be able to get the water first. So you can purify your water if you can get it. There are also Aquamira makes tablets that you can put in. The two bottles you get, same size as these, they'll do 60 gallons of water. And that water's good for, as long as it's sealed up in a BPA-free container, it's good for 5 years. Or you can, with purification-wise, there's filter systems you can get. I actually meant to bring a couple of those with me other than this one, but they're just individual filters. I'm sure people have heard of Life Straw, and there's a lot of brands out there that water is just ready to drink right off the bat. We have a small handheld filter smaller than this. It's good for 100,000 gallons of water if the water's at a certain criteria. Now, the dirtier the water is, the less water you can get through it. It really depletes the life of the filter. And then there's the good old-fashioned boiling. Boiling's great if you have a heat source and a way to boil the water. So you have to think about that. A lot of people are like, well, I'll just get some water and boil it. As long as you have a way to heat that water and boil it, great, if you can get the water. So some chemical purifications do take 35 minutes. Some of them are up to 4 hours. It just depends on what you're using. Filtering gives you an immediate result, but it is a slow process. Some filters take hours to get the water through. Boiling, again, it's anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. You're cleaning your water up. You have to let it cool down, and you have to have a heat source. There is a Other ways, other ways, of course, to do all this. That's a little bit of research. You can find all kinds of ways to clean water. Again, in order to, if you're not preparing and storing water, and you think you're just going to get water and filter it, if it all goes south or whatever scenario you're preparing for, like I said, you have to be able to get that water. Now, if you think that you've got a stream out back, and I'll just go scoop some up, maybe go out back today and scoop some up and test it and see what's in that water. Maybe watch it and see how it flows in the summertime versus the springtime. White Day Creek's not too far from here. In the summertime, it turns from a creek to a bunch of little water holes. Now, in them water holes, a lot of stuff grows, right? So I don't know if we have any hunters in here, but I've seen possums crawl clear up in a carcass to eat it out, and that possum then goes down to that creek, washes and drinks. So now, if you're willing to drink after a possum, be my guest. But you have to be able to get the water to purify it or clean it. So a better way to do it is just to be self-sufficient in some way. Which basically means that you have a water supply readily available, a source you trust and is usable at any time. You got deep wells, shallow wells, springs, cisterns, rain catchment, whatever your source is, it just has to be a water that you trust. And your silespis, there's a few pictures of different type. So a shallow well you can get, it's a drive point, it's a system that you can order, you can buy, you drive it in. You may have to go 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 locations to find water, but you drive it in, you put a manual pump on it, you now have a water source. It doesn't require electric to pump. You go out and hand pump it, just like the pioneers did. They dig one by hand, or this system here lets you keep from digging it. You can put a drive point in. A deep well, of course, everybody knows what a well is. They put a shaft in, you put a pump in. Deep wells are great. You've got a water source that you live on. That's what you use. But when the power goes out, every pump I've ever been around requires 220 at a decently high amount of current. So it takes, if your generator will run it, great. But if you're not prepared to be able to run that pump, then you just lost your water source. And cisterns, which is, we have a spring at our house. Water flows year round. So a cistern's a way to capture that water. And you can also cistern with rain catchment. You put it underground. There's rain catchment, some pictures in there, different types. Rain catchment is not just something that you use for just your gardens. Rain catchment is something that's actually potable water. You put what they call a first flush system in. It washes all the dirt and debris off. It goes into one area, that plugs off, and then the water goes into the containments. There are people I've seen videos of a guy that's been on a farm, and for 10 years, that's his entire water source for his farm is rain catchment. Now, check your local guidelines and make sure that there's not somebody out there that's got some type of rule where you have to have a permit to catch rainwater, or you have to pay a tax for it, or make sure that's not in your area. But it is allowed in the state of West Virginia, but if you're in a suburb somewhere, you may not be allowed to. So, but rain catchment, there's you can gather and store a huge amount of water with rain catchment, and it can be clean water. That's I know people that drink rainwater and they say it's the best water they've ever tasted. So it's just clean, pure water. So whatever the source is that you're going to use, just make sure that it's a source that you trust. And if you don't trust it, then you have to use some type of chemical or filter system to make sure that it's usable. You can get test kits, just have one on hand in case you ever question water. If you got it there, you can test it real quick. You can get them for $20 or $30, just depends on what you want to test for. But water is an essential thing. Everything you hear people talk about today, there's going to be water involved one way or the other. Whether it's cleaning and sterilizing your jars to can, or whether it's rehydrate, whatever it is, that water is going to be involved. So without water, a lot of this other stuff just kind of goes away. And it's something we have to get our heads wrapped around, that the faucet one day cannot work. It's just that simple. And with supply chain, we've a lot of, like where I work, we order a lot of parts and components, and a lot of that stuff's getting hard to get. And it's not just us, it's everywhere. So if you start having failures in your pumping system, then there's a possibility that there could be times that those are down, or the rolling brownouts and blackouts that you hear about all over the country. Those don't just affect individuals, it affects the entire area, which includes the pumping stations that supply the water to you. So if you take just a little bit of time to think and do a little bit of shopping and researching, these stack up really easy. There's 6 gallons of water. I can get by drinking a half gallon a day. So I've got nearly a couple weeks in this one thing. So you just do the research, find out what's around you, what's available, and practice a little bit. You don't want to, in a life-saving situation, you don't want to just be trying it out. You want to know how to use it. You want to take some filters out and filter some water. See the difference in it. Stir the dirt and mud up in a spring somewhere and then get you some water out of it and see what you think. Lord forbid you would have to do that to survive and not really know what's going on. So, yeah.
Steve, have you
Yes.
checked on the Primo bottles at Walmart? Are they any good?
The Primos? No, I'm not a big Walmart guy, but no, I use I've got Life Straw filters. Is all the filters I've got. They just have a good reputation. They work, so I just stick with them. So. Seychelles, yeah, Seychelles. We have 2 Seychelles at the house. Seychelles are really good, so yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Good job. Switch out the tables. I get to talk about dry canning, and I love to dry can. Another word that's used is oven canning, and then also canning milk. And the reason I like dry canning is because it is easy. And how many of us like easy and quick? Okay. Everybody learning something today? Getting prepared with some water and some canning vegetables and meats, and now we're going to talk about some dry goods. Great. Thank you so much. First of all, let's talk about where we can purchase the canning jars. I know some of you are going to hop out of here and go to the local Walmart. So first of all, you can get a case of canning jars at Walmart. You can also get them at Big Lots at times. Rural King in Morgantown is another great place, and right now they have the wide mouth mason jars as well. And you can get them on Amazon, but please note they're going to be priced a little bit higher, especially for those who have Prime with free delivery, because the heavier the weight, the more costly it's going to be for Amazon to ship them to you. So I wanted to make sure you all knew where you could potentially get those mason jars. Dry goods, what can we can? Now certainly with dry canning, we don't have to use the pressure canner. We're talking about using our ovens to dry can or oven can. I have brought from home, I brought flour. These are pasta noodles, which I dry canned in 2013. Some oats, 2013. You can also dry can pasta. Dried products is what we're looking at. Flour, sugar, pasta, dried cereals that don't have sugar, that kind of a thing. So when we're thinking about dry canning, we want to look at what products are dry that we can. And this is very simple. You're still going to use your mason jars. The difference is we don't have to use what we call a head on it. When you can meats or vegetables or various products, they're going to say leave an 1-inch head or a 1/2-inch head, meaning what's the space between the top of the jar to where the product and liquid is, or the product is. With dry canning, you don't have to have a head on it or any space. You can fill the jar up all the way to the top. So just quickly, we're going to fill our jars up, and we're going to put all of our jars on a cookie sheet so that we don't have to handle the jars and put them in there on the oven rack. So you're going to put jars on a cookie sheet. You're going to fill your jars up with your flour or your pasta, what have you. Fill them up to the top. Another difference is you're not going to put the lid or the seal on them. You're going to leave them open on the cookie sheet. You're still going to boil your rings and your lids so that we have a proper seal. And then you're going to put the dry product in the oven at 200 degrees, and you're going to leave it in there for 1 hour. As soon as that hour is up, you're going to remove the cookie sheet. You're going to set them on the counter. Then you're going to make sure that your lids and your rings or your seals are dry. You don't want any water in with your dry product. You're going to place this on the jar. Then you're going to put your ring on it. Again, finger tight. You're not going to Hercules it, as Rhonda said. And then you're just going to leave it sit. And probably within the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear pop, pop, pop. They're sealing. Once you dry can, and this is just epic. I love this because I'm a saver, because I'm cheap. So these, once you dry can them or oven can them, are good for 30 years. 30 years. Say 30 years. That's magnificent. Now, some people will say, well, I don't think I want a dry can because I don't know that I'm going to need it for 30 years. We don't know what's going to happen. We would like to think we know what's going to happen, but with the cost of things going up, we want to be prepared. And hey, what's the problem with leaving it to our kids or grandkids because they'll be able to use it? So I always put on the top of the lid what's in it and what date did I seal that. So then all they have to do is look at it 30 years. Once it's dry canned, good for 30 years. All right. Does anybody have any questions on that? Now we're going to talk about, oh, wait a minute. I really want to say this. You can also do white rice. You can't dry can brown rice because it has too much oil in it. I know rice, does it really have oil? Yes, it does. Brown rice you cannot dry can. White rice you can. Flour, pasta, dry beans, oats, whole grains, and wheat. White rice, but not brown rice. Now, some websites will tell you that you can't dry can brown sugar. You can. I have. As long as that seal does not open, as long as you have that seal closed, you can still dry can brown sugar. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is canning milk. I have never canned milk in my life, but I did about, in June. So in June of 2022, I learned how to can milk. Now, this is not dry canning. This is actually using the pressure canner when you can milk. So looking along on page 13, why would you want to can milk? You don't drink milk. I don't drink milk. However, we're not talking about just ourselves. I take milk in my coffee. Of course, cooking, we have to use milk sometimes when we're cooking certain items or baking certain items. So, and we also want to be prepared for those that may not know to do this. There's been a shortage of Enfamil, different things like that. Who's to say that we're going to have gallons of milk to buy in the grocery store a year from now or 6 months from now? Again, we're not getting into fear. We're faith people, but we're going to prepare like the Joseph generation that we are so that we not only have enough to help ourselves, but those around about us. So some research says that you can't can milk, but at the grocery store, you can buy canned milk. So yes, you can. You still want to boil and clean your jars, your lids, your bands, your canning utensils. And they're suggesting that you don't can older milk. The fresher is the better. And here's another key. You don't want to learn this the hard way. You want to leave the milk on the counter and let it warm up. You don't want to immediately take your cold milk, pour it in the jars, and seal it up and put it in the canner because you will have an explosion. You can't have that cold meat with heat. So I leave the milk out on the counter for about an hour and a half before I pour it in the jars. And then what you want to do is you want to put the lids and the seals on there after you have sanitized all that. Then you're going to place it inside the canner, and they recommend onto the top of the line or the bottom line at the bottom with water. You're going to put your canning jars in there. You're going to put the lid on here. You're going to have the spewing of the steam. As soon as the spewing of the steam occurs, then you want to exhaust it for 10 minutes before you put the gauge on the nozzle. Then you're going to have this on here, and you're only going to have it on here. I have to look at my notes here. It will take some time once you have the pressure gauge on there. Once it starts rattling, because it'll make a rattle sound, as soon as it starts rattling, turn the fire off. And then once that's done rattling, you're going to watch for the top. This piece right here, when it's under extreme heat and pressure, pops up. You want to wait until it goes all the way back down. before you remove this lid. All the way back down before you remove the canning lid. Once you remove the canning lid, you're going to remove the jars of milk out, set them on your counter, and then within an hour, you're going to hear pop, pop, pop. It's sealed. Some websites say that milk is good for a year, some say 2, some say more. Again, you want to make sure that the seal is still sealed, that it hasn't popped open. When you can it, you're going to see, now this shook up a little bit, you'll see some cream at the top, and that's okay. And over some time, it may get a little yellowy, but where do we get butter? Milk, right? So it's safe. You just want to make sure that the seal is still sealed, all right? Okay, so that's it for the dry canning and the milk. And now what we're going to have is we're going to have Brian Brown. Hand him your mic here. Guys, you can remove this table over to the side, please.
All right, I'm Brian Brown. I'm going to talk to you about you can't do it all. When my wife called me and said Karen had called and asked us to speak she had said about cooking without fire or electricity. So I sit on the couch and I'm like, okay, cooking without fire or electricity, I don't know how to do that. Let me go look, let me research a little bit, find somebody that knows something about it, and then it kind of dawned on me that I needed to speak on something other than that. Kept hearing in my head that in the Bible, David wanted to build the temple, and God said, nope, not your job. That's going to be your son's job. You have other things that you're good at. When Solomon started building the temple, he was the wisest man ever, but he went and found Hiram to do the work because Hiram, that was his thing. In the Gospels, a lot of things say the book of Matthew was a tax collector. He was more speaking to the Jewish converts. Mark was basically a preacher's son. He was speaking more to the Romans. Luke was a doctor. He was speaking more to the Greeks. And John was the beloved. He was speaking to everybody. But what I want to talk about is knowing your abilities and your limitations. I am not a gun person, but I married a gun person. Jennifer is a gun person. We work well together. She is more on the preparedness side. I'm more on the homesteading side. You have to find people to complement you, whether it's a spouse or friends or neighbors or just a community. There's people that are hunters or fishermen or into husbandry with animals. I don't know a whole lot about any of that. Butchering meats and things. There's growers. I think I'm pretty good at growing vegetables. I have a bunch of potatoes that would probably go really good with Rhonda and Steve's chicken. So, hey, here's a bag of potatoes. Can I have a couple cans of chicken? Knowing who knows what. You need to know people or be able to be a forager or a harvester. You're gatherers. People that can cook. I can cook. I don't know if you want to eat it or not sometimes, but you have to know how to do those kind of things. Another kind of person is financiers. Not only financiers for money, but somebody may have supplies or other things that could be used. You need organizers. You know, if you're not very good at organizing, which I'm not, you got to have somebody that can organize things. Dr. Derek is a good example. What we've seen with him with the men's group, he can organize awesomely. Knowing your people that know things that you don't. We've talked a little bit about this type of person, preservers. There's not that big of a difference. If you're a hoarder, you have a skill set that other people may not have. You have to have that mentality. The hard part is knowing when to throw it away. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to have some things that go bad. I spent hours doing this, and now I got to throw it out because it didn't work. It's hard. One of your more important people that you need to know, if you don't think you have any skills, you're pretty much wrong, because you have sweat and you have muscle. That's the gophers. I tried to tell my son Mason, the gopher is the most important person on a job site or on a task, because they're making it a little easier. You need somebody to be a leader. I try to do that better, but spiritual and organizational. Yeah. If you have somebody that is a organizational leader, but you have a spiritual issue, you may not want to talk to that organizational leader. They're totally different. People that are builders or craftsmen, to repair or fabricate things, have the tools and the equipment. Again, they would go back to being a type of a financier. Medical people. I was a medic. There's other people in the church or in your community that you may know that have some medical experience, and if something happens, could be able to help. If things went real bad, like Steve was talking, the communications, the radios, if you know somebody that's a ham radio operator that's near you, they're going to have, when I was in the fire department in Virginia, we had a lot of times that we had hurricanes, knocked everything out, including our dispatch. Ham operators stepped up. We didn't even know some of them existed in the town, but they stepped in. They did, and that's something that's not a hard thing to get. You take the test, you get the equipment, and you're an operator. Again, if you don't think you have any skills, people can teach. You may be able to learn something and not be able to actually do it, but you may be able to teach somebody else how to do it. In the fire department, we would say sometimes some people that can't teach. It was kind of bad to say that. We meant it in a bad way, but once you think about it, sometimes you can teach somebody to do something, but you're not that. You can't physically do it yourself, but you can explain it in a way that somebody might understand. There's other odd skills that people have. Making sugar. If you can, we actually made some sugar from sugar beets. We've made cheese before. Making cheese, that's something that could be important. They were talking about keeping cash on hand, so if your neighbor has something that you need, you could go give them some cash. We know during the pandemic, a lot of places didn't want to take cash, but again, like I said, my bag of potatoes and onions. Hey, I need something. Here's a block of cheese that I made. It's all about. I'm afraid it's going to become a lot about bartering. Know who to barter with and what you can barter. And you may think that your skill, something that you do as a hobby right now, is just a hobby, but it could be something that somebody else might need that skill set too. What can you do if you have a small yard or an apartment to get your own food? You can square foot gardening. There's books out about it. It's instead of planting a row like what we all see in the gardens. You plant patches in square feet. You can plant 16 carrots in a square foot. You can plant 9 bean plants in a square foot. More higher intensity. The rows are just there for equipment to go through. If you plant every 3 inches or every 6 inches this way, you can plant every 6 inches this way too. You can grow indoor with lights. A lot of stuff talks about you need to have special grow lights, and most of the plants I start, I have regular fluorescent lights. They're LED fluorescent lights. They do just as well as any of the grow lights that I have. You can help with other skills. You know, if I'm growing plants and you want some plants, come carry plants for me. Help people out with things if you don't have a skill set. Canning and preserving, something that they didn't talk about that we've looked into a lot is freeze drying. You're talking about if you freeze dry something, you could take your leftovers from dinner, freeze dry them, and it's good for 30 years. You open it back up, reconstitute it with water. It's another type of preserving that it's just way more expensive to get into and takes longer. If you have land that's too rocky, you could build raised beds or raise animals on it. If you think you don't have any knowledge, YouTube is there. You can learn almost anything from YouTube. Some of the stuff you have to maybe watch 3 or 4 different people's opinions on. Like Karen said, the can and the milk. Some people say a year, some people say 2 years, some people say 5 years. Canning eggs. We've watched a lot when we had chickens about liming eggs. I've watched them and they make me nervous, but they said know how to barter, know who you can barter with. If I can't remember what I was going to say. We had some chickens. We went to a friend's house down a couple counties away. We didn't know how to butcher chickens. He needed help butchering chickens. He just needed, I call it dumb labor. It's the gopher. So me and Mason helped him butcher chickens. He gave us 8 chickens for helping him out. Try to do something or learn something. Things, like I said, with the pandemic, things are going to get weird no matter what. And if you know people that can help you out and you can help them out in turn, I think that is, like I said, when she asked me to speak on one thing that I had no idea, well, I could either learn it or I can come out here and talk to you guys about finding somebody else, and maybe I can find somebody that knows how to cook without heat or electricity. And that's all I got.
Good job, Brian. Very good. Wow, we are really learning today, aren't we? This is fantastic. So you and I may not have a particular skill, but we may have another skill, and that opens the doors up to some bartering, or you do this and I'll give you that, etc. So right now we're going to begin a video with Doc and Melissa Garrett, who are a wealth of information as well. Unfortunately, they were unable to be here with us today, so we're going to watch a video now. Larry?
Hi, if you don't know me, my name's Melissa Garrett, and in just a few minutes, my husband Doc is going to be joining us. And we are going to be showing you how to cook in case of an emergency. You know, sometimes the electricity goes out, and we don't have the luxury of having the items in our kitchen to use to cook. So there are lots of different ways that you can still prepare a great meal in case that happens. one great thing for you to do is to always keep some items prepared in your pantry, like granola or protein bars. And I know some of the great people here are going to show you how to keep items on your shelves that are canned, like vegetables and meat and even some flour and things like that. Another really easy way to cook would be to utilize your grill. Whether it's a charcoal grill or a propane grill, having that and being able to cook on that by having lots of supplies is a great way. I know we've lost our electricity before, and we've utilized not only the grill itself, but the burner on the side. There's also in your handout some really cool ideas on how you can make a box oven, a sun oven, and a rocket stove. So make sure that you take the time to look at those as well. Now, Doc and I are going to be sharing with you how to cook over an open flame and how to use a camp stove. So both of those ways are pretty simple and don't take a lot of supplies. And if you're like me and you don't like to have a lot of junk around your house, then stockpiling or storing things might be a little bit of a problem. But it's not going to take a ton. So let me have you look at your handout at some of the good things to have on hand. You know, we're going to talk in a minute about the importance of being able to actually start a fire. So having waterproof matches, strikers, or even a simple flint and steel, which are very small and don't take up a lot of room, would be great. Some items that will help you keep the fire burning, like paper, so maybe newspapers, wood and kindling. All of those items are great. And then some items that you can cook on the fire. So aluminum pans, empty tin cans, a cardboard box might come in handy, aluminum foil. All of those items would be great to have around. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to show you how to start by creating your fire and actually show you how to cook a meal on your fire. But I want to leave you with this, Proverbs 22:3. A wise person sees danger coming, and he takes precautions. The senseless just walks blindly forward and deals with the consequences. I don't know about you, but I want to be wise. All right, I hope you enjoy the next few videos about how to cook over an open fire.
Hey guys, so we're going to talk about building a fire. That's the most important part of starting to get cooking. So the most important thing is to get dry wood. This is dry because when I break it, it just clicks. You can see that. It's really dry. And I've already gone and grabbed some really dry grass, and we're going to break this up in little pieces. You don't want your wood to be any bigger than a matchstick. And we're going to just throw those on there. And I've already done some just to save some time. But you just want them to be in little pieces. Okay, so I got these fire starters at Walmart, and these are 100% natural. There's no fuel in them. It's just natural wood. So I like to cook with this because, you know, when you're cooking, you don't want the fuel going up into your food. So we are going to try to use flint and steel to start this fire with 100% natural. We'll see how it goes. I got a good bed in here. I got my grass. I got some twigs that are about the size of a matchstick. Some are a little bit bigger once the fire starts going. So I'll break that up just a little bit, put it in the middle, and we're going to use our flint and steel to see how this goes. Now I got this flint and steel at Walmart for $3. I'll show you how it goes. So it's tied to each other so you don't lose it, but you just kind of push it and it
sparks.
Okay, so we're going to spark it right on there. I see some smoke. We're getting somewhere. Okay, we got a flame. Gonna blow on it gently. patient with it. Check that out. We got a good fire going. We're going to start adding some wood to it. I chopped up some dry firewood, kind of lay it on there.
Now, if you are someone who's not made a lot of fires, there are a lot easier routes you can go. Building a fire takes time and practice. So this isn't something that you will probably be able to do just the very first time. You can use strikers. There are all different kinds of fire starters we talked about earlier. But you know, this is bare bones, just using what we have and not having anything on hand. But there are a lot of things that you can stockpile, you can prepare to have, which would make cooking on a fire a lot easier.
Yeah, and if you're going to cook with it, you definitely don't want to use something that has like a petroleum base or a gas or something like that, because you want it to be all natural. But this fire's starting to take off. You want to make sure you have plenty of fuel for your fire. So I have plenty of firewood here to keep it going. And it's looking really good. Okay, so I showed you worst case scenario with a flint and a steel, right? You're gonna, I don't know if I can do it left-handed, let's try it right-handed. Okay, flint and steel, you create a spark with a flint and steel. But at Walmart, you can get these for $2. It's fireproof matches. Let's try them. Okay. Come in a handy dandy wrapper. Let's pull one out. Kind of looks like a sparkler for kids. Oh, first strike. There it goes. Let's see if this lights.
Easy peasy.
There you go, easy peasy. We also have our handy dandy striker, and we can light newspaper. Newspaper is a great source of fire. That one's out of gas. Let's try this one.
All right.
That will also start a fire. And then Melissa made a homemade fire starter. This is an egg carton, the corner of an egg carton. She put a bunch of lint and candle wax in an egg carton and melted the wax on the lint. And we're going to try one of these waterproof matches to see if that'll light that. Let's try it. Oh, first strike. I don't know, Melissa. Is it going to light? Let's find out.
Pinterest fail or
Let's
a
find out.
Pinterest win?
I think it's going to light.
So in the handout, you'll see that there are all different ways that you can use natural things to get a fire started. Looks like our fire is starting to burn pretty well over there.
Yeah, you want your fire to burn up. You want to get a good bed of coals that you can cook over. You don't want the fire burning up because you'll burn your frying pan. So you want to get the fire burnt down to where there's just a good bed of coals in there. And then a little later, we'll show you. This is what we had at the house. We don't have a cooking grate, but we're going to use this rebar to put over this stove, and we're going to put our frying pans on top of this rebar to keep it from going right into the coals. We'll see you in a little bit. So I just wanted to show you an alternate method to cooking. I got this stove when I was 16 years old, so I don't want to speak for my age, but it's been a hot minute. So this is a backpacking stove, and all you have to do is pour this Coleman fuel in there, in this container right here. And then once you pour the fuel in, you loosen that up, pump it up. It takes like 20-30 pumps. You feel it starts to get tight. Keep your thumb on there, turn it, tighten it up. You get this red knob here, that's your gas. So you want to get your striker ready, and again you can use a match or you can use flint and steel if that's all you have, but I prefer a striker if you have it. Turn that red knob down and you'll hear the gas start to come out. Light it. And again, you don't want to put a big skillet on this, you just want something small. But to boil water or to get something heated really quick,
Make coffee.
This works really good. I've cooked many meals on this stove back in the Boy Scouts, and I've lived on the trail for 10 days on this stove. It works really well. Once it gets going, this flame will burn down and it'll just be a blue flame. It's hard to see out here in the light, but that's kind of how it works. Kind of adjust the knob, and like I said, eventually that flame will go away. You don't want to cook over that bright flame. It'll turn a bright blue here eventually. There it goes. So now, like I said, it's hard to see, but there's a bright blue flame down there, and you put your skillet right on there and you can cook right over top of that.
Awesome, and you can get those on Amazon, probably at Walmart, just about anywhere.
They're really cheap. You get a bottle of this, it lasts you a very long time, and you'll be cooking for years. Okay, so what we have here is a cast iron skillet from Lodge, 2 cast iron skillets actually. Gigi and Poppy bought these for me. I'm very appreciative. They clean out very well. They're like $15–20 at Walmart, so not expensive, but something good to have. And we're just gonna set these. You can see we got our coals burnt down.
How long would you say that took?
It did take probably 30 minutes
Yeah.
To get our coals burnt down, but we just have just a little bit of a open flame there, but at this point we're going to go ahead and put them on and start them heating up. Like I said, the rest of it's coals. You don't want an open flame, you just want to be nice and have some coals in there.
Right, and you can move those around
Right.
to kind of make like a higher heat, lower heat.
Yeah. We're going to put our handles facing out so that we don't burn our hands when we grab the Skittles. But we're just going to let them heat up for just a little bit, and we're going to get ready to cook.
All right, we just diced up some potatoes and peppers and onions from our garden, added a little bit of seasoning, and now we're gonna use tin foil to tent that up so that it'll steam over top of the fire. Tin foil is something great to have on hand. Those tin foil trays, all of those are things that you could cook over an open fire with. And as you can see in the pamphlet that you have, there are lots of different things you can do with tin foil or aluminum foil and tin cans, aluminum foil pans, lots of different ways that you can use those to cook when you don't have electricity.
All right, so our skillet's up to temperature. We're gonna put some butter in. Ooh, looking good. Put it down. not a bad idea to have a pair of gloves because this gets really hot. I'm going to go ahead and add the meat to it. This is deer meat that we harvested last year. So our meat's cooking. Looking good there, starting to get brown. Our skillet's ready on this side. We're going to add a little bit of oil. And Melissa's chopped up some squash and mushrooms and zucchini and onions. I'm just going to add that to the skillet. Ooh, that sounds good.
We have our potatoes in a packet over there as well. And as you can see, everything is gonna cook up. Hi guys.
So there we have it. It's been roughly an hour before we got the fire started, the coals burned down, we got the food on. Melissa chopped the meat. Well, the meat was already chopped up, but the veggies before she got theirs chopped up, the onions, we got them in the skillet. So it's been roughly an hour before we could even begin to eat, right?
Right. So if you're going to cook in this fashion, you have to, have practice and know how to start a fire. You have to know how to do it, how much time you're going to need to do it, and be prepared and give yourself some time. The great thing about this is that we can let the coals die down and we could do it all over again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? In the same place.
Sure.
With not a lot of materials.
Yeah.
You'll see in the handout that there are lots of other ways that you can cook without electricity. We talked about some of those at the beginning. But, I just wanted to kind of leave us with a quote by Ben Franklin. And it said, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." So we know that God's going to protect us, but being prepared, having some items on hand, knowing what you would do if there was an emergency is not a bad idea, right?
Right, yeah. One thing I want to emphasize is the most important part about cooking is getting your fire started. So the most important part is getting your fire started. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. So you need dry wood, you need an ignition source, a match, a striker, or flint and steel. That's the worst case scenario. But you need to have something to start your fire. Without a fire, you can't cook food. So I would emphasize practice, practice, practice.
Right.
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, you just can't start a fire with flint and steel overnight. It took me a time or two. So just make sure you practice.
Right. And if you don't have time to practice, make sure that you do have supplies on hand. Like Doc mentioned earlier, waterproof matches, several strikers, those kinds of things that will last you for a long time.
And like I said, flint and steel is worst case scenario. So
But it's good to have it, right?
yeah, it's good to have. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. And I want to leave you with Nahum 1:7. The Lord is good, a refuge in time of trouble. He comes for those who trust in him. All the things that we've learned today are so important. It's valuable to be prepared, but we need to remember that if we trust in the Lord, he'll be there for us. All right, I hope you have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you soon.
How's everybody doing? My name's Steve Beatty, if you don't know me, and I'll be doing it on freeze drying. I bought some samples in to show people what it is to freeze dry. Just take one of them, and watch it don't melt when you put it in there. Don't burn yourself, okay? Freeze drying is the best way to go. You got your three threes. You need 3 minutes for air, no more than 3 days for water, 30 days for food. Out of the food, freeze drying is the best by far. Does anybody know anything about freeze drying? You know a little bit? No, nobody knows. That's pretty wild. Well, I've been doing it for a few years now, and the pros and cons to it is the con is it's very expensive to get started. It's going to cost you, they got 3 different sizes. They got small, medium, and large. I bought the medium one. I think I paid almost $4,000 for mine, but I got the stainless steel one. So you can get about, I don't know, $1,000 cheaper if you just get the regular. I want to upgrade. I want to get a larger one now. Those are really the only cons to it, other than the big one. The big one, you have to have a breaker just for that. The other ones you can plug in anywhere. And it's out of, by far the best. You got these mile bags. I mean, look how light they are. I put one in a jar. This here's meat, this hamburger, and I put it in a jar, but I don't do jars really. I do the bags, and then whenever I do it, after I freeze dry it, I put an oxidizer in it, and that gives me another 5 years, so we can get 30 years easy, at least 30 years out of this food. And you can eat any time. And so now some of the pros is your vitamins A, B, and C, you don't lose any when you freeze dry. When you dehydrate, you lose 100% of your vitamin A, vitamin B, and vitamin C. And you lose 50% of your nutrients in canning or dehydrating. But freeze drying, you keep at least 97% of your nutrients. So that's good to know, Like I said, it's expensive starting out, but once you get it, then after that, it's cheap. For a long time, I bought these already. You can buy the food like that, and I would buy it and stockpile it. I'm a prepper from way back. So, and then I started doing my own. And right now, food's going up so high that you go buy these, and they cost a lot of money now. Yeah, they cost. So that's the way it is. If I can get some, Mom, can you get me a pair of scissors? I didn't bring my knife. I was going to rip one of them open. Okay, and so, like I said, the pros to that, they're great for bug out, for camping, anything like that. They're light, so you can throw them in your packs, instead of putting food in there and carrying it. Thank you, Bill. Just hang on. Now, I did these back in 7/10/20. And I'm going to put some of them on a plate here so you guys can try. Oh, they smell good. Look at that. And there's my oxidizer. Let me get that out. There's my oxidizer in it. And then I'm going to put some in water so I can reconstitute it. Now, have you guys, anybody ever eat Special K cereal? Okay, when you get it with the strawberries in it? Well, those are freeze-dried strawberries in there. And when your milk goes on it, it reconstitutes it. So, pass this around maybe. You guys can come up afterwards and try it out and see what it's like. It's a good business to get in if you got time. I don't have time, but it's a good business because you can do it online. You can sell online or at the farmer's market. You can sell. You can make money. I mean, a lot of them farmers, they're into food preparation like that. You can barter with farmers. Hey, I'll freeze dry your cow you butchered. Will you give me some of the cow? So yeah, that works out good. And let's see, shelf life. Like I said, if you use oxidizers, more than 30 years you'll get out of that. You always maintain the flavor. You never lose no flavor. You can do meats, vegetables, fruit. Like I said, these strawberries, they're great snacks when you eat them without reconstituting them. Meats is, like I said, this here, you just put water in it. Brings you meat really good. And like I said, I use mylar bags so I can get more years out of it. After I run it through the freeze dryer, I vacuum seal it with the oxidizer in it, and it makes it last for a long time. But it's a good business to get in, like I said. Go ahead.
The only downside I know of it, it takes time to freeze dry. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, it takes 24 hours to freeze dry. Huh?
I said I wanted the people.
Yeah, 24 hours on average to freeze dry. But like I said, after you got mine's got 4 trays. So I can put 4 trays of food on there, and I can put spaghetti on there, fruits and vegetables, meats, or you got meals left over, put them in your fridge when you get enough, put them in there and freeze dry them, and you got them 30 years from now. So, yeah. You don't have to. I do, because when I open it up, I want to eat it. You know, but no, you can, it could be raw. Make sure you write on the bag, because it might be years that you got raw chicken or raw cooked chicken. You want to write that on there. You date it, write on what it is, and make sure you put whether it's raw or not. Meals, like I said, you know, lasagna, put it on there. You can do your dog food. You can do dog food and freeze dried. Now me, I'm not freeze drying no dog food. I might freeze dry my dog, but I'm not freeze drying my dog food. Okay? That's just me, though.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
when you put that in the Mylar bag, two questions. Can you reuse the Mylar bag after you open it? And secondly, after you have all of that, I mean, jars I'm putting on shelves, where do you put all your Mylar bags?
Well, where do I put them?
Like in a Rubbermaid container?
Yeah, I just got them on my stand where I got stainless steel stand, and I got everything on it. What was the other question?
Can you reuse the Mylar
Yes.
bag?
I mean, listen here, I just cut open. I could put other stuff in there, put another oxidizer in it, and reseal it.
Okay.
So.
Can you reuse the oxidizer?
No. And you want to be careful when you buy the oxidizers. You don't want to buy too many. I mean, you want to buy a small pack or something, because once you open them, they start working, and they won't last long. So that's one of the bigger ones. I like to buy even smaller. This one, I'll wait and do a whole bunch of freeze drying, and then I'll put them in all at one time, and that way it'll keep it from sucking the air out of it, and that's what makes it do that. Well, yeah, I buy totes, and I put all these in it.
Okay.
So that, you know, just for a long time, make sure mice don't get in it. I don't have no mice in my house, but in my outbuilding where I'm putting my freeze dryer, because I moved to a place down the river. So, you know, that's, and another downfall to the freeze dryers is loud. And it runs all night, so you want to keep it away from your bedroom. You don't want that thing anywhere near your bedroom. Be up all night. Mine, I got it in another building, so I'm good now. Is there any questions on freeze drying? Anybody got any questions? Just trial and error. You know, put some in. I just had her to get some, and just put some water in it and see how long it takes. You can pour it out. You know, strawberry's going to be wet. Pour it out and eat it. Yeah.
So like your lasagnas or leftover meals, how would you reconstitute that without making it mushy?
Yeah, just put a little bit of water at a time on it, warm water, hot water, and just wait and see. Don't put too much on it, and it'll reconstitute itself. So, any more questions? Mine's a quick one. I'm the last one up here. Go ahead.
Would you consider letting us know how much volume per tray, and us paying you to freeze dry food for us?
Well, I'm too busy to do it. But if there's somebody that can afford to buy one, it's a good business to get into, guys. It's a good business, and you can make some money doing it. Like I said, you go buy these here at the store, what are you paying for it now? You know, and so yeah. I don't know. They all come from online. These bags here come from Harvest, right? Which is the company that does the freeze dryers. Go ahead.
Yeah, I watched a YouTube video the other day. The lady actually took a dozen eggs and cracked them all open, and she freeze dried the eggs and then put them in a quart jar. And it could be like the 25, 30 years. She just pulled them out, put a little bit of water, he can rehydrate them just like you can scramble eggs.
And the beauty of it is you can scramble the eggs, or you can put them in as over easy. Put them in there, and they'll do it that way too. And so you got eggs over easy. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Yeah. Any more questions? Well, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you.
Thank you, Steve. We all have to come up and try the strawberries. I'm going to try one right now. Oh, those are crunchy and good. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Karen, Steve, Rhonda, Brian, Steve, everybody that spoke today and took the time, Melissa and Doc, to prepare this for us. And you know, I know my son-in-law Doc is an Eagle Scout, and Don and I laugh. I'm pretty much a city boy, as it is. You know, I can do a little bit of stuff, but Don and I always laugh. Say, if something comes up, if we have an emergency to prepare us, we know where we're going. We're heading to the farm, aren't we, hon? But it's just wonderful information to know, and I just thank you all for coming out and be a part of it. I hope you all gained some information, something you didn't know. There's some easy ways to prepare stuff. Takes a little bit of effort, but that's good effort. It also, there's things that we can purchase that'll help us to do it. We just want to say thank you, and I hope everybody online that's watching has enjoyed it as well. So let's close in prayer. Father God, we just thank you for this time to come together, and we just thank you for your wisdom, Lord, on this situation to prepare us, Father God, that you're always there, Lord, for us, and you're always there to see ahead and make provision for us. So this is just one other way that we can put a tool in our tool belt that we can be able to sustain ourselves. So we just thank you for that. We thank you for those, Father God, that took the time to prepare and teach us. We thank you for those that's come out, and we'll just fail not to give you the glory and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, if everybody got a syllabus, I hope it was one per family. If you don't, let me know. We've got a few left over. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at church.